Namaste students. Welcome to English literature class. And in today's class, we shall learn about the poem Daffodils, written by William Wordsworth. Daffodils is a beautiful poem written by William Wordsworth, which talks about the relationship between nature and human mind, how both are interrelated, and how nature has a greater impact on human life. Now, what is daffodils all about? Daffodils is a flower, and for your information, it is the national flower of Wales in UK. And do you know that if the flower blooms exactly on the New Year's Day, people there believe that it's good luck for the entire year. You can go deep into it and find out what exactly it is if you are enthusiastic about it. But this is the general thing about the flower daffodils. Now, what is the poem Daffodils all about? On the whole, what is William Wordsworth trying to tell from the poem Daffodils, through the poem Daffodils? The Daffodils is a poem about forming memories and introspection. It is creating memories and introspection. Introspection is to see within. It begins with the poet describing his carefree state of mind. I hope all of you understand what is carefree state of mind. Then his surprise and reactions on coming across swathes of daffodils, and finally how they affected him in the long term. Now, what are swathes of daffodils? Swathes of daffodils are those narrow rows of daffodils, the way it is grown. Now let's move on to know about the poet. The poet is William Wordsworth, born in the year 1770 in England, and he was an English romantic poet who, with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, helped to launch the Romantic Age. Now, other than your textual introduction, his poem Tintern Abbey is the one which introduced romanticism to English poetry. If you are really interested in poetry, I ask you to read the poem Tintern Abbey as well. It's one wonderful poem which you will definitely enjoy. Now, he showed his affinity for nature with the famous poem, I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud is the poem which is Daffodils. It is the daffodils which has another name here. Now, what is showing affinity for nature? Affinity is that strong feeling that you like something. Here, he has that strong feeling towards nature. Now, let's move on to the poem Daffodils by William Wordsworth. Now, as I recite the poem, I ask you all to concentrate on the punctuation and the pronunciation part so that it is easy for you all to understand as well while you read. Only if you stop or pause properly in between the lines, you will be able to understand. And while the interpretation is going on, the paraphrase is going on, I ask you all to jot down few notes, which definitely is not there in the textbook, so that it becomes very easy for you to understand and write your answers from your perception. Daffodils by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. See how rhythmic the lines are, isn't it? Only if you pause wherever the punctuation is, you will definitely be able to read and enjoy the poem. Now, what is the poet trying to tell us? In the first two lines, I wandered lonely as a cloud. Now, what exactly wandering means? Wandering is to roam around or to just walk aimlessly without knowing your destination. Just walking only with yourself. That floats on high over vales and hills. Now, what floats? Boat floats, isn't it? On the water. So that's the action shown here, the way the cloud is passing on, and that has been compared to his movement. Poet describes his loneliness, comparing his emotion to an isolated cloud. You know what is isolated cloud? Isolation, being all alone, drifted apart from others, broken off from the rest as he roams around, walking over valleys and hills. Hope you have understood these two lines, children. When all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So while he was wandering all alone like a cloud, what did he see? He saw all at once a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Why golden daffodils? As you can see the picture there, they are yellow in color. So the color of the gold is also bright yellow. That is how they are called to be as golden daffodils. Where were they found? Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. What were they doing? Fluttering and dancing. These are the actions of living beings, isn't it? Now, this is how there are certain poetic devices used also in between the poem, which we will discuss later with the examples. Now, what is the poet trying to tell in these four lines? That is the last two lines, which is called as couplet, and the two lines before that. Here, the poet describes stumbling upon a large crowd of daffodils. He notices them dancing in the breeze. The breeze is actually allowing them to move. Therefore, it seems like they are dancing in the breeze. Hope you have understood these lines, this stanza. Let us move on to the next one. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. Now, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. Now they are continuous. There is no break in between. They are continuous to be seen as stars. There is the word used as. There is a comparison happening. As stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. To what is he comparing? He is comparing the daffodils which are continuously grown and dancing there to the stars that shine on the Milky Way. They are stretched in never-ending line. Never-ending line, definitely it has to end at one point of time. But here, the poet is so happy that he feels that they are stretched to never-ending line along the margin of a bay. Along the margin of a bay. Margin is what? The end line of the bay, river or lake. The poet is comparing the mass of stars in the night sky to the large quantity of daffodils before him. He saw thousands of daffodils, and it appeared as if they were infinite. 10,000 saw I at a glance. Can anybody count exactly 10,000 at a glance? No. This shows the exaggeration of the poet. What is he exactly trying to tell here? The poet may or would have seen a few daffodils in a domestic garden earlier. Maybe that is his memory. But perhaps this is the first time he is encountering such humongous group of daffodils. So he is so overwhelmed with joy and says that at a glance he could see 10,000 of them. What were they doing? Tossing their heads in sprightly dance. Poet yet again here emphasizes the amount of daffodils he can see. He uses the word sprightly. Sprightly, which means lively, full of energy, full of life. But sprightly word, the word sprightly, comes from the word sprite. A sprite was a Greek fairy who inhabited nature, similar to a spriggan. So the author uses this word very subtly. The author doesn't give so much of weightage as the word has, but he uses it very subtly, as if almost describing the daffodils as lively spirited fairies. Hope you have understood this part of the poem, the complete stanza. Let's move on to the next one. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. Here, the poet tries to tell or describes the waves dancing along with the daffodils. He says the waves beside them, beside the daffodils, danced. But they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. What did they do? Were they equal to each other? No, the dance of the daffodils outdid. They outshine than the dance of the waves. The poet describes the waves dancing along with the daffodils, but the daffodils appear to be happier. The daffodils appear to be happier than the waves, and they therefore outdid them with happiness. Glee here means happiness. A poet could not but be gay, so the poet was helpless. It was inevitable for him to be a gay, happy, to be happy, to be gay, to feel happy. In such a jocund company. In what? In such a good, cheerful, and light-hearted company. The poet shows that his loneliness has dissipated into happiness. Dissipated, changed into happiness. Being gay because of his company. Here, what company is he referring to? The daffodils and the waves as being his companions or his friends. Jocund means very cheerful and light-hearted company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. So finally, out of all this, Whatever he was gazing till now, he was just gazing at it and then thought about a little. What is that wealth? What is that benefit he got from doing this? The poet explains, even though he was amazed and loved watching the daffodils, he was still thinking, what did he gain finally? The poet refers to the wealth of happiness and gaiety that the beautiful daffodils brought to him. This wealth was induced by the joyful memory of the daffodils dancing in the breeze by the lakeside. So ultimately, this is the joy what he has gained. Hope you have understood. For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So often, what does he do? When he lies on his couch in vacant, not doing anything at all, in pensive mood, pensive, sad, or sorrowful mood. They flash upon that inward eye. Inward eye here is, you can call it as his subconscious mind or maybe his dream. So what does the poet try to tell here? He tells that he usually lies on his couch in a blank, disinterested mood or a thoughtful or reflective mood. However, pensive, as I have told you, usually refers to thoughts of sadness. Therefore, when the poet lies on his couch, he is usually in a blank or quite sad or gloomy. They flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. Now, what is that inward eye? As I told you, it is the subconscious mind of the poet or maybe his dream. Which is the bliss? Bliss is what? Blessing of solitude. Now, you have to know exactly what solitude means here. There is a big difference in being lonely or being solitude. Loneliness is actually a negative state. It is usually told as a sense of isolation. One feels that something is missing. That is being lonely. Solitude, on the other hand, is the state of being alone without being lonely. Here, he is not lonely. There are lots of memories of daffodils which is accompanying him. And that's the bliss of him being solitude there. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So whenever the image of daffodils is displayed in his memory, it makes his feeling of loneliness disappear, just like when he first saw them. His heart matches the same happiness of daffodils and dances along with them. Hope I was clear with the interpretation of the poem, children. Read the poem while you watch the video and understand the meaning of the words and the sentences. Now let's move on to the next part of the poem. The title, how aptly the title is given. The title of this poem is Daffodils. It is called so as the theme of the poem is directly linked with the poet's personal experience with the field of daffodils. The poet is reflecting on a memory lane and describes it in the poem. So it is his nostalgic experience with the daffodils. So I guess daffodils is the right choice for the title. It is aptly used, right? Now, what is the theme of the poem? The theme of this poem is nature. But is it only with nature? No. There are a few spin-off themes like happiness, memories, and a past personal experience. The past personal experience of the poet with the daffodils. It talks about the happiness also. It talks about the memories also. So this comprises of the theme in the poem. Now, how is the structure and rhyme scheme of the poem? In each stanza, Wordsworth structures the content of the poem by focusing the first three stanzas on the experience at the lake and the last stanza on the memory of that experience. Now, do you know the difference there? The first three stanzas on the experience at the lake and the last stanza on the memory of that experience. That is how it is structured. Now, how is the rhyme scheme patterned? The poem contains 4 stanzas of 6 lines each, which are called as sestets. In each stanza, the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, C, C, ending with a rhyming couplet. As I have told you, the last 2 lines after the first 4 lines are called as couplets. Now, what are the poetic devices used by the poet? There are so many beflowered words. There are so many beautiful words used, isn't it? So with what poetic device it has been described? Let us see now. Hyperbole. They stretched in a never-ending line. The poet exaggerates this quote by implying that the amount of daffodils in the field is infinite. But it does eventually end. It is just a large field of flowers. This makes the reader think that the amount of daffodils in the field is infinite. Now, do you know the reason why poetic devices are used? It is to have a strong impact on the reader, to take the reader to his imagination. Next one is personification. Tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The poet describes the flowers as living beings, tossing their heads purposely, but instead the breeze is blowing their heads back for them. This would make the reader think that the daffodils were living beings and had human characteristics. Imagery. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. The poet uses vocabulary and descriptive language to create vivid images of a single cloud floating over hills and valleys. That is how the movement of the cloud is explained. See the word used there, floating. This allows the reader to create an similar image to the poet. Simile. I know all of you are familiar with simile. Now let us see what is the simile in the poem. Continuous as the stars that shine. The poet compares the daffodils with the stars of the Milky Way using a simile. This allows the reader to create an image. Metaphor. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. which sets the poet as a cloud high above the landscape. Now here the cloud's movement is compared indirectly to the movement of the assonance, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Now this talks about the sound. The poet repeats the vowel sound in this sentence in the poem. The poet does this to add rhythm to the poem and make it sound pleasant to the reader. You might have experienced this. If you read the poem or recite the poem, you will definitely experience the rhythm in the poem. Onomatopoeia, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. A soft breeze causes the daffodils to flutter and to dance. By the word fluttering and onomatopoeia, the author establishes or creates a certain impression or a rhythm within the line. And this is why the flower's movement is so vivid, but not disorganized. They are not messy. They are very organized and very beautiful to see. Now, what is the feelings of the poet? On a general note, Wordsworth has defined poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected while in tranquility. Don't you feel that you can relate this poem with this feeling of the poet? Definitely, it is the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions which you can't express, but definitely you can express it in words. Recollected while in tranquility, tranquility in your own pace. Hope you have understood these poetic devices, children. The next is tone. At the beginning of the poem, the mood the poet portrayed in the poem was loneliness and sadness. He did this by comparing himself to a single cloud, isolated from the rest. However, clouds usually come together in the sky. But here he describes only a single cloud. I wandered lonely as a cloud. But as the poem progresses, the mood of the poem transitions from sadness, loneliness to happiness. Transition changes. The poet does this by reflecting on a memory of a host of golden daffodils. He constantly mentions the joy and the wealth that the daffodils brought him, and finalizes the poem with a line that shows us that he was happy and no longer lonely. And this was because of the daffodils. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. These are the lines which expresses his thought, his ultimate happiness, what he has gained from the scenic beauty of the daffodils. Now the next one is alliteration. Over vales and hills, beside the lake, beneath the trees. Again, stressing on the same sound. Hope you have understood the poem, children. Please read the poem and try to understand the words and interpretation of the lines so that it becomes easy for you to remember and answer all the questions. Thank you, children.